Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. This is our kind of Q3 of 2021 Cybersecurity Awareness webinar. We've got quite a few of you on the phone with us today, so we're going to go ahead and leave everyone muted just to kind of keep the background noise down. If you do have a question for me, if you'll just type it into the questions box over on the side there where your control panel for the webinar is. When we get to the end of this, if we've got some time, we'll come along and answer those questions. If we run out of time, we'll answer them offline by emailing you back directly. So I do want to thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day today to join me. I'm going to try to keep this to 30 minutes. And we've tried to put this webinar together to be kind of a timely, here's what's going on at this point in time thing from a cybersecurity standpoint. So let's jump right into it, and I'll kind of show you what's going on and what you need to know about it. If you have been living under a rock for the last year or two, you may not have heard of ransomware, but if you haven't, then haven't been living under a rock, then it's been all over the news lately, and there's been some pretty big instances of ransomware attacks. Let me just, for the quick sake of those who maybe know of the word and aren't quite sure what happens with ransomware, let me give us a quick little explanation of it. So ransomware is a process where a cyber criminal runs a program on your computer inside of your business or inside of your home and encrypts your data so that you can't use that data. And then you can't unencrypt it through any manual process. So what they do is they say, okay, I've encrypted all of your data. If you want me to unencrypt it, you need to send me some money. So I'm holding your data for ransom. So that's the pure and simple process that takes place for ransomware to work, is somebody gets a piece of software into your network or your business. It executes in the background. You don't know it's doing its work until it's done. And then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, you get this pop-up on your screen that says all of your files are encrypted and you can't use them unless you send me, $10,000 in Bitcoins or something like that. So that's what functionally how ransomware works. There have been some big headlines for some major ransomware attacks in the last year. You've all heard, I'm sure you heard about the Colonial Pipeline getting shut down completely by ransomware. They wound up paying $4.4 million in ransom to get their data released so that they could get back in business and get the pipeline up and running again. In this case, the FBI was able to retrieve some of that money, but still they wound up paying the ransom to get their data back. There was a major national meatpacking plant that was shut down from a ransomware attack. And again, you don't think about these kind of businesses as being really reliant on computers, but they are. And when ransomware gets into your systems become completely unusable until some action is taken. Either you pay the ransom and the bad guys give you the code to unlock your data, or you do something else to get recovered from that situation. So this is happening a fair amount here. Bose Systems got a big ransomware attack this year in March. So these are big companies. And these are big headline making things, mostly because either it's a great big company and it has a major impact, or both, it's that and the attackers ask for a lot of money. And the problem with that is sometimes I find that small and medium-sized businesses start to kind of get a false sense of security, thinking that ransomware is something that only happens to big businesses. And that's not at all the case. Ransomware happens to small and medium-sized businesses every single day in smaller numbers. The ransom is smaller. Maybe it's only $5,000 or $10,000, not big enough to make headlines anywhere. Maybe it only took down a company that has 25 employees. So it's not going to make any headlines, but it's going to be as disruptive for that small company as it is for these big companies. It just doesn't make the news. So please, 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 if you're a small business owner, don't fool yourself into thinking you couldn't be a target for ransomware because of your size of your business. That has nothing to do with it. Obviously, when these guys realize that they've gotten their stuff into a great big business, they know they can ask for a great big ransom. But if they get it into a small business, they're perfectly happy to take a few $1,000s from you to get your data back. Now, we're partnered up with a lot of different security vendors in our business here at Applied Integration, and I'm a member of the FBI's InfraGuard outreach program, which, you know, the FBI is pushing information out to partners like us. And what I've done is I've gone through a lot of that information, and I've pulled out some mid-2021 year statistical information. So this graph that we're seeing in front of us, this is as of the middle of this year, just, you know, the end of June. And these are the statistical numbers that one of our software vendors or one of our security vendors is reporting. These are real numbers. The straight malware attacks of just viruses that cause grief have gone down because they're not as profitable as some of the other attacks over the past year. But intrusion attempts is up again a fair amount, 9–10%. An intrusion is when somebody's actually trying to break into your business through your internet connection. Okay, so that's still happening, and that's a good justification for having a good, strong firewall on your internet connection. People often think this doesn't happen, or they think that people are only trying to break into banks. But people are trying to break into banks, into businesses of all sizes and shapes and forms, because they're just trying to get in. And then they'll figure out what to do once they get inside your business. And there's a couple of different things that we'll talk about as we go along, one of which is cryptojacking, which is the very next statistic we have here, which is up by 23% year over year since last year. I'll explain cryptojacking in a minute, but cryptojacking, for it to work, basically these guys do have to somewhere get into your network. So they're going to get in with the virus, they're going to get in through a pure straight up intrusion, and then they're going to use your machine for cryptojacking, but I'll come back to that one. Encrypted threats are when these guys are trying to packet something up like a nefarious program and slip it through into your business through the firewall inside of another packet of information. So that's also on the rise. But the two big ones that we should be most concerned about are these last two numbers on the right here. The IoT attacks is up by 59%. Now let me explain what IoT stands for. IoT stands for Internet of Things. And basically the Internet of Things devices are anything that connects to the internet that's not really a full-blown computer. I'll give you a few examples. Your Nest thermostat at home is an IoT device. Your Hulu player or your Roku player that's hooked up to your TV is an IoT device. It's connected to the internet, but it's not a full-blown computer, and you're not logging into it interactively and using it like a computer. Your smart fridge, your smart oven, your Delta washer that you can tell Alexa to turn on to fill up the dog's bowl can be considered an IoT device. Your Alexa device, all of these devices are what fall into this category of Internet of Thing devices. And the reason that we care about these devices is they're starting to just blow up in numbers. Everyone loves these things, and they're throwing them on the network everywhere, inside of businesses, Ring cameras and all kinds of stuff. And many of these devices don't pay the proper attention to securing that device from attacks from the outside world. So the bad actors of the world are starting to figure out that the easiest way inside of your business might be through your Nest thermostat or your Ring camera or your Roku device or any other, IoT device out there. This is really starting to ramp up. It's up 59% over last year, 32.2 million attacks to these kinds of devices, and it's starting to work. And most of these people that are building these IoT devices have yet to come to the party in terms of security. Sometimes you can't even change a password on them. And so every single one of them out there in the whole world has the exact same password to get into them. So if I know the password, I may get in there. Now I'm in your network and I can do other things. But by far the thing we need to be the most concerned about is the ransomware attacks. Look at how much ransomware attacks have grown since last year. 151% year over year we're up. So this is still majorly big. If we look at ransomware growth by quarter, again, this is as timely information as I can put in front of you right now. This quarter 2 of 2021, you can see how much of a spike we had in ransomware growth. So Why is this happening? It's happening because people have to pay the ransom because they're not properly backing systems up. They're letting it get into their networks, and then they're having to pay the bad guys the money. And by and large, the bad guys are overseas. They're shielded from any form of prosecution or retribution. They're not getting caught. They're getting the money in terms of these anonymous cryptocurrencies that they can then go spend, but they're not being caught. So it's really, really profitable, and it's really difficult to stop it. And some of the ways that we're going to have to stop it is through being smarter about how we use technology, being smarter about cybersecurity, and paying more attention to it. And there's another kind of even more nefarious part of this ransomware thing that's starting to take place now. I mentioned how the bad guys get into your network and they encrypt all your data. Well, what they're starting to do now is right before they encrypt all your data, they're snatching a copy of it and sucking it out of your network and storing it on their computer systems. And now, besides the fact that they want money from you to give you access to your data back, they may be trying to extort you for more money to keep them from releasing that private business data that they pulled off your network out into the public. Well, why would you care about that? Well, because it might be sensitive information. It might be your intellectual property. It might be your customers' private credit information, and you don't want to have your business get destroyed because you allowed your customers' private information to be placed out on the internet because your data was being extorted for more money. So these guys have figured out that while they can make the money off the ransom on you getting access to your data, if they've pulled a copy of it off your network first, they can also turn around and extort you for further money by threatening to dump that money out onto the web. So this is really a bad thing. It's really out there. And just think about it. Look around your business. Look at the data that's being stored on your systems. What would happen if suddenly that fell onto the internet? Would your customers leave you in droves? Would your business reputation be ruined? Could you be sued and put out of business? I mean, all these things can happen as a result of these guys getting into doing their thing. And they don't care. They'll be on to the next business tomorrow. They don't need you to be around. Data breaches are getting bigger every day. I've had webinars where I've just gone through and talked specifically about specific data breaches. I figured since we were doing cybersecurity and since this one is so fresh in everyone's mind that I would just take a few minutes and talk about this T-Mobile data breach that just happened. If you haven't read the headlines, again, let's get you out from under that rock you're living under and bring you up to speed. But basically, T-Mobile was breached. Bad actors reached into their network and pulled a bunch of data out, just like I talked about. They exfiltrated that data out, dumped it onto the dark web. And as T-Mobile is analyzing this breach, they're saying, okay, for a lot of people in the T-Mobile system that have phones through T-Mobile, the information included in this breach is things like your first name, your last name, your street address, your birthday, your social security number, your driver's license number, some seriously powerful personal pieces of private information that can be used for identity theft, for a process called SIM swapping. This is serious. And this one's going to have some major impact on people's lives because if I have all of those elements about you, if I have your birthday and your social security number and your driver's license number, I can take over your identity with any number of organizations. I can steal your social security checks. I can take over your bank accounts. I might be able to get the phone company to send all your calls to my phone by doing the SIM swapping program where I call in and say, hey, I got a new phone. Its new serial number is blah, blah, blah. Now, the phone in my hand, T-Mobile thinks it's your phone in your hand, and they're sending everything that was coming to your phone to the one in my hand, including the text message from the bank saying, hey, did you just set your password? And if so, type in the 6-digit code to prove to us you reset your password. Well, that's me, the bad guy, just resetting your password and getting that code that you think was supposed to come to your phone. That's what SIM swapping does, is they actually convince the phone company that you're calling in and telling them you have a new physical phone in your hand that you need to have all your stuff transferred over to. And now the hackers got your whole life in their hands. So if you are a current T-Mobile customer, if you've ever applied for a T-Mobile account, please go to T-Mobile's website and read in detail the news on their site about this. They have specific steps in there. They're discussing how to know if you were affected, if your information was in this breach. If they know you were involved in the breach, I believe they have already forced you to change your security PIN number at T-Mobile's site. But if you haven't, do it anyway. Go change your password today. In fact, you could leave right now in the middle of this webinar if you want and go change your T-Mobile password and your PIN number right this minute, because this one's a serious one, and you don't want people getting in there and getting access and changing your phone to be their phone and taking over everything for you. So this one's a big one. It's got more data in it than a lot of these breaches typically have. Sometimes all that gets out is your social, or maybe your email address and the password into some account, but not your social security number, not your driver's license. In this instance, some people have had all of that stuff in one fell swoop handed out to the dark web parts of the internet that traffic in identity theft. So seriously, take this one seriously. It's a big one, and you should get yourself up to speed if you are a past or current T-Mobile customer. Okay, moving on. Phishing is still a big deal. I know I've talked a lot about ransomware, but phishing, email phishing, business email compromises are still a big deal. And we spend some time on this one because this is one that's in front of everybody. This is in front of everybody in your organization, their inbox. Think for a minute about how much information we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis in terms of email. We're all getting more of it. We're getting formal requests for funds transfers through email. We're getting invoices through our email that we're just then turning around and paying. People trust their inbox, and they, generally speaking, think of it as a pretty safe place. And the bad guys know that. And so what they're doing is they're spending their time crafting up very convincing looking emails to put in front of your folks to try to get them to wire transfer them some money, or pay an invoice that's to a bogus company, or even click on a link that goes to a website that looks like the bank's website and have them try to log in there, in essence giving some bad guy your username and password to that account. So the inbox has become the new kind of front lines in this war against these bad guys. This is how a lot of stuff is getting in. If I click on an attachment to an email, I might be the one who that attachment was the file that had the ransomware in it that then infects the entire network. And the one most important thing we can do is kind of keep our folks educated about the dangers of this stuff and show them how to identify a fake email, or talk to them about double checking things outside of email before they take some action like doing a wire transfer or something like that. Here's another big headline for you. This one is just a few days old. There was a town in New Hampshire, Peterborough, that had a business email compromise attack, which scammers, did some research on this town, probably found the names of some of the people that worked there through, obviously websites and public records and whatnot, and they formed up an attack to kind of convince these guys, these folks that worked at the small town, to, do a funds transfer or got someone, who shouldn't have access to bank accounts, access to those bank accounts. And basically the town had $2.3 million stolen to these overseas scammers through nothing but a series of fake emails. So they used kind of a combination of what's phishing, which we call, putting a fake email in front of you, and social engineering, which means I do a little research through, things like LinkedIn and Facebook and your website and so forth to find names of principal people so that I can make my email look very convincing. And by doing a little bit of work, I would expect that the folks that pulled this off maybe spend a week or two researching this town before they launched this attack, and their payday for that is over $2 million. And chances are they will never be caught, never be prosecuted. And that all happened through just a series of emails. Okay, so I said I was going to mention cryptojacking. This is one that I find not a lot of people really have on their radar screens in terms of cybersecurity. But as you saw back in the beginning when we were talking about things that are going up in frequency, cryptojacking is starting to become more prevalent. Let me just quickly give you an overview of what cryptojacking is. You've heard of things like Bitcoin and Dogecoin and these cryptocurrencies. Well, one of the ways that I can get cryptocurrency into my bank account or into my cryptocurrency account, is I can have a computer run a program to crunch a bunch of numbers against this big data set to, in essence, get the results out, and the results are what turns into these little coins for me. Now, crypto mining is what that's called, takes a lot of computing power and a lot of electricity, and people are looking for ways to put a whole bunch of computers to work mining for them. So what these bad guys are doing is they figured out that they can distribute that work against a whole bunch of computers if they can compromise someone's network and take over 200 workstations inside of that network and make each of those workstations do a little Bitcoin mining in the background, and at night when no one's there. And so what's happening today is they might send in a phishing email that has an attachment that when you click on it, it's not going to do anything that you know about. It's not going to put ransomware on your machine. It's going to install little cryptojacking programs that are going to run in the background, or they're going to run when your computers are, when you're gone home at night. They're going to take all the resources of the computer, and they're going to do this mining and send the results off to the bad guy who put that stuff in there. So you're going to make him a bunch of money using your hardware, your electricity, and potentially bogging all your computers down depending on how much it's running. So suddenly you might find that your whole network just seems slow. When you really get in there and start studying what's going on, you might find that your computers have been tasked with doing this work for these bad guys all over the place. Now, this is, again, the most recent information I can find for you on the statistical cryptojacking volume of what's going on out there. And you can see that March of last year was a huge year for cryptojacking. And March of this year was also one of the biggest quarters or months of cryptojacking attacks. And then it fell down quite substantially in April. So this is a cyclical thing to some degree, it seems to be. And I think what we're finding is that as the value of Bitcoins goes up, so does the number of cryptojacking attacks. And when the value of cryptocurrencies goes down, the number of attacks go down, and those guys turn their attention to other forms of attacking systems because they're just going after the most bang for the buck. So this is happening, and it's happening up, and sometimes it's very frequent, sometimes it's not so frequent. But it's just another way that bad guys are making money off your resources, your stuff, and doing their thing. Okay, now I do know that I've thrown a ton of stuff at you, so I like to stop every so often and just pause for a minute. We'll take a breath here, and let's talk about some takeaways that I want you to take away from what we've talked about so far. First of all, and I didn't really put these bullet points on here, but first of all, you've got to make sure your network is properly secured physically. So you should have a good firewall on your internet connection. You should be running some excellent antivirus software on all your PCs and servers. You should be being careful with your Internet of Things devices that you're putting on the network, and either put them on a separate network or make sure they're somewhere other way isolated from your important systems. You should make sure that you're patching operating systems properly. All of those things are just kind of givens that either you're doing, or that you've outsourced to some IT service company, or you've got an IT department that is taking care of that stuff. If you're not sure about that, please get sure about it. Make sure that someone can explain to you how well your firewall is locked down. And someone can explain to you what the what the operating system patch policy is to make sure that your machines are getting patched with the latest security patches that fix problems in them. So those are givens. Every network should be that way. If yours isn't, please get it that way by talking to us or talking to your IT guys or someone that should be doing it for you now. Just make sure you know it's being done. And if it's not, fix that first. Second of all, on an individual basis and across all of your employees, it's important to use complex passwords. The days are gone when we can have a password that's your dog's name and your birthday. Okay, that just doesn't cut it anymore. You should be using passwords that are just a completely random series of numbers and letters and special characters. And you should be using a different password for every single website. Every single site you go to should have a different password. Let me say that one more time. You should have a different password for every single website you log into. If you're reusing passwords among websites, when a website gets breached and that password makes it out into the open, people have access to every single site that you're sharing that password with. Now, I get it. We all hate passwords, and it's easy to make up something that you can remember. But it's actually better now to use a password management tool that will generate complex passwords for you and then store them for you and type them in for you when you go to your websites. If you're not using a password management tool, we've got one. All IT service providers have one. You should be looking at it, learning how to use it, and using it so that you can get to the point where you're using a totally random, made-up password and a different one for every single site you go to. That's the only way you can protect yourself when a site gets breached and your information shows up out on the dark web. And if we take that one step further, look at every site you're going to and look for a two-factor authentication or a multi-factor authentication or some additional security step. And when it is offered, turn it on and use it. So what a two-factor authentication thing is like is maybe you'll get a text message sent after you've typed in your username and password. That site will send a text message to your phone with a 6-digit code in it or something like that, and you'll have to type that code in to gain access to that site. If you can do that, by all means do it, because that makes it just one more level of complexity for someone to steal your stuff. Because if they don't have your phone, they're not going to get past that two-factor authentication point. Be skeptical of the stuff in your inbox. I know we've all gotten so blasé about inboxes now and email. We're so comfortable with it that we just trust everything that's in there. But you really can't do that now. It's becoming, like I said, the front line in the battle of cybersecurity, and you have to start looking at the stuff in your inbox with a degree of skepticism and look at that email and go, well, now hold on a second. Is anything about that look the least bit unusual? And if so, don't open that email. Don't click the attachment. Don't wire transfer the money until you pick up the phone or get up and walk over to Bob's office and check with him to make sure he really did want you to be wiring $100,000 off to some unnamed account, because that's the only way you're really going to protect yourself. Just add a little level of skepticism to it and train your employees to do the same thing. And if it's important to you, if you've got critical data on your systems, make sure you know how they're being backed up, because if you do get ransomware in your network, or if you get these cryptojacking virus in your network, the easiest and most complete way to get rid of that stuff is to turn back the clock and simply restore the system completely from a pristine state before that thing got in. And then we know every trace of it is gone. And that can only happen if the backup technology that's being used in your business supports that. So you need to know how things are being backed up, and you need to know what the capabilities of them are, because that might be the key to getting out of this situation without creating a bunch of havoc for yourself. And I do like to really take a minute at the end of this thing to talk about education. So you're getting educated today by being in this webinar, and we're recording this webinar and we're going to give you a copy of it. So feel free to share it with your employees, but you have to take ownership of the education of your employees as a business owner, as a business manager, as a principal of the company, and include it in. It's just as important as any other process that you teach new employees when you bring them in. You need to teach them about the dangers of clicking on emails. You need to teach them how to validate a funds transfer request through something other than email before they do it. If you don't, then it's kind of on you, not on them, when something happens and you lose a bunch of money. So as you're thinking about this stuff and as you're working with your IT providers to make sure that you're properly covered, don't forget to take the time to gather your employees up and engage them in this cybersecurity world and help them become an ally to you. And they can help you be safe more than anything else by just being themselves properly trained and skeptical and knowing when to ask a few more questions before they go and do something. So, and this doesn't stop. The education thing's got to be ongoing because the cybersecurity world is constantly evolving. The bad guys are always coming up with some new attack or new way to do things. So, we're not ever going to be done with this, and I just think that's the way it's going to be for going forward now. So it's just got to be folded into everything you do as part of running your business. So there we are. We're up against our time frame for this webinar, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I don't see any questions that it doesn't look like we've answered in the webinar. So we'll let you get back to your day. If you have any questions, any concerns that we have maybe brought to your attention that you aren't getting good answers to, or you want to dig in a little deeper, or you're scared to death now and you don't know where to turn, you can certainly reach out to us. We'll be happy to talk to you. Our number's right there on the phone or on the screen in front of you. But other than that, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. I would like to thank you once again for taking your time out of your day to spend with us. And please watch your email for further webinars of this nature, as we feel like it's really important for us to just keep you educated. So thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time around.